My name is Naomi Carter, and I'm 27 years old. At the moment I'm telling you this, my now ex-boyfriend is probably still insisting he did nothing wrong. He always was good at that, not telling the truth exactly, just standing in the middle of the damage with that calm, offended look, like everyone else had somehow become unreasonable around him. And honestly, if I had not lived through it myself, I might have questioned my own version too, because that was his gift. He never started with something obvious. He started with small things, things that looked harmless if you only saw them one at a time. A name mentioned too often, a smile that lingered too long over a text, a tone that made me feel like I had interrupted something every time I asked a normal question. His name was Adrian. He was 25. We'd been together for about 18 months, which is long enough to build routines with someone, long enough to start folding your future around theirs without even realizing you're doing it. At first, things were easy with us, or easy enough to feel real. He was charming in that effortless way some men are when they know exactly how to adjust themselves to the room, thoughtful when he wanted to be, funny without trying too hard, the kind of man who could make a whole table laugh and then lean over later and say something soft enough to make you feel chosen. I did love him. I'm not going to rewrite that part now just because the ending was ugly. But there was always Tessa. Tessa was his ex-girlfriend, 26. They had dated for 3 years, broken up 2 years before Adrian and I got together, and somehow remained best friends. That was the phrase. Always delivered like a final answer. Best friends, mature people, history, but no mess. Nothing to worry about. And in the beginning, I tried very hard to be the kind of woman who didn't make something out of that. I told myself trust meant not flinching every time her name came up. The problem was, her name came up all the time, not once in a while. Not in the normal way people occasionally reference someone they used to know. I mean constantly. Tessa thinks this place has the best pasta in the city. Tessa showed me that band before they got popular. Tessa says I always order the same drink when I'm stressed. Tessa thinks you and I would actually get along. Tessa says you remind her of one of her old coworkers. At first, I laughed some of it off. I even tried to be generous about it. People have history. History leaves fingerprints. I understand that. But after a while, it started to feel less like background and more like a third presence at the table. I would be halfway through a story, and he would cut in with, "That reminds me, Tessa." I would suggest somewhere to go, and he would say, "Tessa loves that place." I would mention I was tired after work, and he would casually tell me Tessa once worked 3 doubles in a row and still made it out for drinks. He never said it in a way that gave me something obvious to challenge. That was the genius of it. Nothing was direct enough to call cruel. It just wore on me slowly, like water finding the same crack over and over until the whole thing weakened. 3 months before everything finally blew up, I noticed the shift. That was when he stopped merely mentioning her and started defending her before I had even accused him of anything. I'd ask, "How was lunch?" He'd say, "Fine." "With Tessa?" And his whole expression would change. "Why, Naomi? You jealous?" The first time he said it, I actually laughed because it sounded ridiculous. "No," I said. "I asked how lunch was." But he only gave me that little look, the one that was supposed to make me feel childish without him having to say the word. Later it became routine. If I asked why they were texting at midnight, I was jealous. If I said I didn't love how often he canceled on me after making plans with her instead, I was insecure. If I pointed out that most people would not be thrilled to hear their boyfriend say his ex understood him better than anyone, suddenly I was controlling. He said those words so often they started to blur together. Jealous, insecure, controlling, dramatic. And because I'm not any of those things, I kept trying to prove I wasn't. That's the trap, by the way. When someone keeps misnaming your reality, you spend so much energy correcting the label that you forget to question why they keep using it. I wasn't jealous of Tessa. That part matters. I wasn't threatened by her beauty or her history with him or the idea that they had once loved each other. I was bothered by the way Adrian used her like a blade wrapped in silk. Soft enough to look harmless, sharp enough to keep me off balance. About 2 weeks before the end, I asked him one night why he got so defensive every time I brought her up. We were in my kitchen. I still remember that. The overhead light was too bright, and I had one hand on the counter because I'd come home exhausted from work and still thought maybe, we were finally going to have an honest conversation. He was scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world required his full attention. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said carefully. "I'm saying it feels like I can't even ask basic questions without you turning it into something else." He looked up then, not guilty, not thoughtful, annoyed. Because every time you bring her up, it's with a tone. A tone? Yes. He locked his phone and set it down like he was humoring me. This suspicious tone. I'm tired of being interrogated. I stared at him. Asking how your lunch was is not an interrogation. He gave a short laugh. You don't hear yourself. No, I said, quieter now. I hear myself perfectly. I think you just prefer it when I stay silent. He stood there for a second, then shook his head like I was proving some point for him. This jealousy thing is really unattractive, Naomi. There it was again. Not concern, not reassurance, not even denial. Just a neat little sentence designed to put me on the defensive. I remember looking at him and feeling something inside me shift. Not break, not yet, but tilt. Just enough for me to realize that no matter how calmly I spoke, he would keep handing me the same script. I would ask for respect, and he would call it jealousy. I would ask for clarity, and he would call it insecurity. I would ask for basic consideration, and he would make me feel like I was the one dragging poison into the room. After that, I stopped asking as much. Not because I felt reassured, because I was getting tired. Then came the posts. He called it a friend reunion, which would have been a ridiculous phrase even if the photos had not looked the way they did. The first story was dinner. Adrian and Tessa across from each other in low restaurant lighting, smiling in that intimate, self-satisfied way people do when they know exactly how they look. The next was at a bar, her body leaning into his arm around her waist. Then a selfie, her kissing his cheek. Caption, missed this one. I stared at that caption longer than I want to admit. More stories followed. Another drink, another angle, another moment that would have been innocent only if it didn't belong to a pattern already built on excuses. The last one went up close to 2 a.m. They were leaving together. I sat on my couch in the dark with my phone in my hand and felt something sharp and cold settle into place inside me. It wasn't heartbreak yet. It was clarity. Because once disrespect becomes public, it changes shape. It is no longer something you can explain away with tone or timing or misunderstanding. It is a performance. And he had just put on one for everyone to see. When Adrian walked in the next morning, he looked exactly the way he always did after a night out. Slightly tired, slightly smug, like the world had happened around him and he had enjoyed every second of it. Like nothing needed explaining. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, my phone face down in front of me, a cup of coffee I hadn't touched going cold between my hands. He tossed his keys onto the table and stretched, like he'd just come back from something completely ordinary. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. My voice surprised even me. Calm, level, no tremor, no edge, just quiet. He glanced at me once, quick, measuring, then headed toward the fridge. You're up early. I didn't sleep much. He hummed like that was background noise, like it had nothing to do with him. Like I hadn't spent the night watching him wrap his arm around another woman and broadcast it to the world. I let a second pass, then another. Fun night? I asked. There it was, the first test. He didn't look at me right away. Just grabbed a bottle of water, twisted the cap open, took a long sip like he had all the time in the world. Yeah, he said finally. It was nice catching up. Nice, I nodded slowly. The photos looked cozy. That got his attention. He turned, leaning back against the counter, bottle still in his hand. I saw it immediately, that shift in his expression. Not guilt, not even concern, not even annoyance. Here we go, he muttered. I didn't react to that, not outwardly. I'm just saying, I continued evenly, kissing your ex on social media is a bit much. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head like I had just said something absurd. It was on the cheek, Naomi. God, your jealousy is exhausting. There it was again. Clean, simple, dismissive. Like the conversation had already been decided and I was just playing my assigned role. I'm not jealous, I said. I'm pointing out that posting romantic-looking photos with your ex is disrespectful. He rolled his eyes, pushing off the counter. If you're jealous, that's your issue, not mine. I'm not going to be controlled by your insecurities. The words landed exactly the way they always did, sharp enough to cut, familiar enough to almost feel normal. But something in me didn't flinch this time. So if I posted photos kissing my ex, I asked quietly, you'd be fine with it? He didn't even hesitate. That's different. I tilted my head slightly. How? Because you'd be doing it to get a reaction out of me, he said. To hurt me. I stared at him. And what do you think this is? I asked. I'm just being friendly, he shot back immediately. There was no crack in his voice, no hesitation, just complete certainty. That was the moment something settled fully into place inside me. Because you can argue with someone who feels guilty. You can even argue with someone who's lying. But you can't argue with someone who has already rewritten reality in their head. The silence stretched between us for a second too long. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair like I was the one draining him. "I'm not doing this," he said. "I'm not going to wake up and get interrogated over hanging out with a friend." "I didn't interrogate you. You implied I did something wrong." "You did." His eyes hardened slightly at that. "No," he said flatly. "You're choosing to see it that way." I let that sit. Let him believe for just a second longer that I was still trying to convince him of anything. "I met her," I said instead. "Tessa." He frowned. "Okay. She seems nice." "She is," he said, defensive edge softening into something almost smug. "Exactly my point." I nodded slowly. "And I've met you," I continued, "so I know you're not stupid." That pulled him up short. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you know exactly how those photos look," I said. "You know what you're implying when you post them. You just don't care." His jaw tightened. "That's your interpretation." "No," I said softly. "That's reality." He laughed again, but there was something thinner about it this time. "You're unbelievable. And you're predictable." The words came out before I even thought about them. For a second, we just looked at each other. Then he shook his head, grabbing his keys again like he was already done with the conversation. "I'm not dealing with this right now," he said. "Call me when you're ready to be rational." And just like that, he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. I sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Not crying, not shaking, just still. Because the truth had finally settled into something clear and solid. It wasn't about Tessa. It was never just about Tessa. It was about the way Adrian needed me to doubt myself so he could keep doing whatever he wanted without consequences. And the worst part? He was good at it. Good enough that 3 months ago, I might have believed him. Good enough that even now, a small part of me still wanted to rewind the conversation and say it differently. Softer, kinder, less confrontational. Like maybe there was some version of this where he would finally understand. But I knew better now, because understanding was never the problem. Respect was. I reached for my phone, turning it over slowly. Her profile was still open. Tessa's Instagram. More photos had gone up since last night. Beach this time. A towel stretched across the sand. The two of them side by side, close enough that their shoulders were touching, her head tilted slightly toward his. Another one. Coffee cups. His hand resting just a little too close to hers. And then a throwback. The two of them from years ago, back when they were still together. Same smile, same angle, same caption style. Some things never change. I stared at that one longer than the rest. Because that wasn't just nostalgia. That was a message. And suddenly something else clicked into place. Not about Adrian. About her. I tapped into her tagged photos. Scrolled. Slower now. Carefully. And that's when I saw him. Different face, different name, but unmistakably current. A man standing next to her in multiple posts, arm around her waist, smiling the way people do when they think they're safe inside something real. 2 years worth of photos. Anniversaries. Dinners. Birthdays. No mention of Adrian. No hint of late-night friend reunions. No sign that she had been at the beach yesterday with her ex, kissing him for an audience. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my grip tightening around the phone. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It was about selective truth. About who was allowed to see what. And more importantly, who wasn't. I opened Adrian's messages, scrolled up, then opened Tessa's profile again. Then the boyfriends. Back and forth, piece by piece, until the picture became impossible to ignore. He wasn't just disrespecting me. He was lying to someone else. And unlike me, that someone else had no idea. I sat there for a long moment, the silence in the apartment pressing in around me. Then I set my coffee aside, finally cold, opened my camera roll, and started taking screenshots. One by one. Every photo, every caption, every timestamp, every detail that had been dismissed as just friends. Neat, clean, organized. If I had learned anything from Adrian, it was this. Clarity doesn't come from arguing. It comes from evidence. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't interested in being understood. I was interested in being done. I didn't rush it. That's the part people always get wrong when they hear this story. They assume it was emotional, reactive, that I sat there shaking, fueled by anger, trying to get back at him. It wasn't like that. It was quiet, almost methodical. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in one hand and my laptop open in front of me, building something that looked less like revenge and more like documentation. Because once you strip the emotion out of a situation like that, what's left is just behavior. And behavior is easy to prove. I started with the obvious. The dinner photos, the bar, the arm around her waist. Then the selfie, her lips pressed to his cheek, both of them smiling like there wasn't a line in the world they hadn't already crossed. I paused on that one for a second, not because it hurt, because of how easily it could be explained away if you didn't look at everything else around it. It's just a cheek kiss. Don't be dramatic. Stop reading into things. I almost heard his voice in my head as I dragged the screenshot into the folder. Then I kept going. The late night story, the timestamp, 2:07 a.m. The beach photos the next day, the towel, the proximity, the body language that said more than any caption ever could. The throwback. Some things never change. That one went in too. Then I added something else. Her boyfriend's profile, the smiling photos, the anniversaries, the captions about loyalty, about love, about building something real with someone you trust. I didn't screenshot those out of spite. I did it for context, because context is what turns something from misunderstanding into pattern. By the time I was done, the folder was clean. Chronological. Impossible to misinterpret unless you actively chose to. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. There was still time to stop. That thought crossed my mind briefly. Close the folder. Delete everything. Wait for Adrian to come back. Try again. Have the same conversation a different way. Hope for a different outcome. Hope he'd suddenly become someone who respected me. I let that thought sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then I closed it, because I already knew how that version of the story ended. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram again. Her boyfriend. His name was Daniel. His account was public. That made this easier. I scrolled through his posts one more time, slower now. Not looking for evidence anymore. Looking for tone. The way he spoke about her, the way he showed her, the way he believed in something that, at least from his side, looked real. 2 years. 2 years of consistency. 2 years of not knowing. I tapped the message icon. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a second. Then I started typing. Hey, you don't know me. Pause. Delete. Start again. Hey, I'm Naomi. I'm dating Adrian, Tessa's ex. That felt clearer. More direct. I kept going. I'm not reaching out to start drama, but I think you deserve to see what's been happening this past week. These are all public posts from her account. Do what you want with the information. No accusations. No emotional language. Just facts. I attached the folder. Every screenshot. Every piece of context. Everything Adrian had insisted was harmless. I stared at the message for a second. Read it once. Twice. Check the tone. Neutral. Clean. Then I hit send. And just like that, it was out of my hands. I set my phone down on the table and leaned back again, staring up at the ceiling. There was no adrenaline, no rush, just stillness. Because whatever happened next wasn't something I could control anymore. And for once, I didn't want to. About 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I didn't grab it immediately. Let it sit there. Buzz again. Then silence. When I finally picked it up, there was no reply. Just a small notification under the message. Seen. That was it. But it was enough. Because now he knew. I set the phone back down and stood up, walking over to the window. The city outside looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Cars moving, people crossing the street, life continuing like nothing had shifted. But something had. I felt it. That quiet, irreversible shift you only notice after you've already made the decision. Another buzz. This time I didn't wait. I picked up the phone immediately. Not Daniel. Adrian. His name lit up the screen. Call. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it stopped. A message came through seconds later. What did you do? I let out a slow breath. Didn't respond. Another message. Naomi, answer me. Then another. Daniel just called me. What the hell did you send him? I leaned against the window, looking down at the street below. Still calm. Still steady. Still not interested in arguing. My phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Adrian. I declined it. Immediately. The messages came faster now. You're seriously crossing a line. This is insane. You're trying to ruin everything because you're jealous. That word again. Jealous. Even now. Even after everything. I typed a response. Simple. Did what? I thought you two were just friends. I stared at it for a second, then sent it. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then his reply came through. You know exactly what you did. I smiled slightly, though there was no humor in it. Not satisfaction. Just recognition. Because for the first time since this whole thing started, he wasn't calm anymore. He wasn't controlled. He wasn't standing above the situation, labeling my reactions, twisting my words, reframing reality. He was reacting. And that told me everything I needed to know. My phone buzzed again. This time not from him. From Instagram. A new story. Daniel. I opened it. Black background. White text. Funny how work trips turn into beach dates with your ex. I watched it for a second, then tapped forward. Another story. A screenshot. One of the photos I had sent. The beach. Her leaning into Adrian. The caption still visible. Then another. And another. Each one sharper than the last. No commentary needed. Just evidence. Pure, unfiltered, public. I leaned back against the glass, exhaling slowly. And just like that, everything Adrian had called harmless didn't look so harmless anymore. My phone started ringing again. Adrian. Again. And again. I muted it this time, set it down, and watched the story continue to unfold. Not in my apartment, not in private, but exactly where it had started. On social media. In front of everyone. It didn't explode all at once. That's the strange thing about watching something collapse in real time. It doesn't feel like a single moment. It feels like a series of small cracks spreading faster than anyone can keep up with. At first, it was just Daniel's stories. One post, then another, then a third. Each one cleaner than the last. No ranting, no insults, just timestamps, photos, captions, lined up in a way that made it impossible to pretend this was anything innocent. Within minutes, people started noticing. Comments disappeared from Tessa's latest posts. Then the posts themselves started vanishing. The beach photos gone. The dinner gone. The selfie gone. Like erasing them would somehow erase the fact that they had already been seen. My phone buzzed nonstop. Adrian. Again. And again. Then Tessa. Then Adrian again. Calls, messages, back to back. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because everything they were trying to say to me was already happening somewhere else. Louder. Clearer. And without me having to be part of it. Another notification. Daniel had posted again. This time it wasn't just photos. It was messages, screenshots, text threads. I opened it. There was Tessa telling him she was busy with family the same night she was out at dinner with Adrian. Another message. She said she was going to bed early. Timestamp. An hour before the bar photos went up. Another one. I miss you. Sent to Adrian, followed by a heart. I stared at that one a second longer. Not because it surprised me. Because of how casually it destroyed everything she had tried to frame as harmless. My phone lit up again. This time, Adrian wasn't texting. He was sending voice messages. After another. I didn't open them. Didn't need to hear the tone to know what they sounded like. Angry first, then defensive, then desperate. That was always his order. Another buzz. A new message. From Adrian. Pick up the phone. Now. I didn't. Instead, I tapped back into Daniel's story. More posts, more receipts, then finally, text over a black screen. 2 years with someone who still acts like they're in a relationship with their ex. I let out a slow breath. That was the shift. The moment where this stopped being messy and became undeniable. Because once someone says it out loud, once it's framed clearly, there's no going back to confusion. There's only fallout. 30 seconds later, my phone rang again. This time I picked up. Not because I owed him anything. Because I wanted to hear what he sounded like without control. Naomi, what the hell did you do? Adrian's voice came through sharp, tight, barely contained. I leaned back against the wall, my tone calm. I sent screenshots of public posts. You had no right. They were public. You're trying to break them up because you're jealous, he snapped. I closed my eyes for a second. Even now he was reaching for the same word. If showing his girlfriend what you've been doing breaks them up, I said quietly, maybe they had problems already. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. You're unbelievable, he muttered. And you're predictable, I replied. His breath hitched slightly on the other end. Then came the shift. You've made this way bigger than it needed to be, he said, voice lowering, trying to regain control. It was nothing, just hanging out. You've blown this up into... Then why is he posting receipts? I cut in. Silence. Why is she deleting photos? I continued. Why are you calling me like this if it's nothing? Another pause. Longer this time. Because logic doesn't leave a lot of room to maneuver. He tried anyway. You don't understand the context. I almost laughed. Then explain it, I said. He didn't. Couldn't. Because there isn't a version of context that makes lying to your partner and kissing your ex look innocent. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer. Careful. Naomi, you didn't have to do this. There it was. Not denial. Not justification. A quiet attempt to make me feel like I had crossed the line. Like I had been the one who turned something small into something destructive. I pushed off the wall, walking slowly toward the window again. You posted those photos, I said, not me. It wasn't meant like that. Then how was it meant? Another silence. Then, I just wanted to get a reaction out of you. I stopped walking. Turned slightly. From me? I asked. Yes. The word came out fast. Too fast. I wanted you to care, he added quickly. To fight for me a little. To show me you actually... I let out a short breath. You wanted me to feel jealous, I said. Yes, no, he stumbled. I mean, not like that. But when I told you I was uncomfortable, I continued, my voice steady, you said jealousy was my issue. You're twisting it. I'm really not. The line went quiet. Because he knew. He knew there wasn't a version of this that didn't make him look exactly like what he was. Someone who created a problem, then blamed me for reacting to it. You're going to regret this, he said finally, the edge creeping back in. I didn't respond right away. I just looked out at the city again, at the same steady movement that hadn't stopped for any of this. No, I said after a moment, I'm not. And before he could say anything else, I hung up. The silence that followed felt different, cleaner. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Not him this time. Instagram. Another post. Daniel. I opened it. This time it wasn't just evidence. It was final. Single. Simple. Clear. Public. I stared at it for a second, then locked my phone and set it down. Because just like that, everything Adrian had tried to keep separate had collided. Completely. And there was no way to pull it apart again. I thought that would be the end of it. That once everything was out in the open, once Daniel had said what needed to be said and walked away, the rest would just fade. Messy but finished. I underestimated how badly Adrian needed control, and how far he was willing to go to get it back. It happened that same night. I was sitting on my couch, the apartment finally quiet after hours of nonstop notifications, when my phone buzzed again. Not a call. Not a message. A group chat. I frowned slightly as I opened it. 4 names. Me, Adrian, Tessa, Daniel. The title sat at the top like a bad joke. Let's clear the air. I stared at it for a second, then tapped in. Adrian had already started. Since everyone wants to act like children, let's have an adult conversation. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. Of course. Reframe the chaos as maturity. Reframe himself as the only rational one in the room. Classic. Another message came through before I could respond. Naomi completely overreacted and tried to sabotage things out of jealousy. This has gotten out of control. There it was again. Jealousy. Even now. Even after everything had already been exposed in front of everyone. I didn't type. Didn't need to. Because someone else did. Daniel. Overreacted? A pause. Then, I have 73 screenshots that say otherwise. The chat went quiet for half a second. Then the flood started. 1 image. Then another. Then 5 more. Screenshots stacked one after another like bricks. Messages from Adrian to Tessa. Not from last week. Not from that reunion. From months ago. Miss you. Wish you were here instead. She doesn't get me like you do. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't twist. Because at this point, it wasn't shock anymore. It was confirmation. Cold, plain, final. Another screenshot. Tessa replying. You always say that. A heart. Another one. Plans. Hidden meetups. Excuses lined up for why they couldn't be seen together too often. All of it sitting there in black and white. Adrian finally responded. Those are taken out of context. I actually laughed out loud this time. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable down to the exact wording. Daniel replied immediately. What context makes I wish I was with you instead, okay? No answer. Tessa jumped in next. This is ridiculous. We're friends. You're twisting everything. Her tone was sharper now. Defensive, fraying. But it didn't land the way it used to. Not after everything already laid out. Daniel didn't argue. He just dropped more. Another batch of screenshots. Then another. Each one tightening the space they had left to move. Then, the shift. Also Naomi. Daniel typed. I blinked slightly at my name appearing like that. Did you know about the others? A small pause. My fingers hovered over the screen. What others? I typed back. 3 dots. Then, the other girls Adrian stayed friends with while dating Tessa. The chat froze. I felt it. Even through a screen, you can feel when something lands too hard. Adrian responded first this time. Fast. Too fast. That's not relevant. Daniel ignored him. Check his tagged photos from a couple years ago. Same pattern. Same captions, same just friends, different girl. I didn't move, didn't speak, because suddenly everything that had felt personal started rearranging itself into something else, something bigger, something repetitive. Tessa typed, stopped, typed again. Wait, what? Daniel didn't slow down. There was Jenna, then Caitlin. Same thing every time. Stay close to the ex, keep them emotionally hooked, hide it from the current partner, call it friendship. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it, because this wasn't about one mistake anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was a pattern, and patterns don't argue. They just repeat until someone finally sees them clearly enough to walk away. Tessa left the chat first. No message. Just gone. Adrian stayed for a second longer. Then, this is insane. And he left too. Just like that. The group chat collapsed. No resolution. No explanation. No clean ending. Just absence. Daniel's name remained. Then a message came through, private this time. Not in the group. Just to me. Hey, thanks for reaching out. Seriously, you saved me a lot of time. I read it once. Then replied, you deserve to know. A pause. Then, looks like you did too. I stared at that for a second. Because he wasn't wrong. Not really. I set my phone down slowly, leaning back into the couch. The room was quiet again. But it felt different now. Not heavy. Not tense. Just clear. Because the last piece had finally clicked into place. This was never about me not being enough. It was never about jealousy. It was never about misunderstanding signals or reading too much into things. It was about being placed into a situation designed to confuse me. So I would stay. So I would question myself instead of him. So I would accept things that should have been deal breakers. I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly, then opened them again. Because one thing was certain now. I wasn't staying. Not this time. The strange thing about everything falling apart is how quickly it stops feeling loud. You expect chaos to echo, to linger, to leave something behind that keeps ringing in your ears. But it doesn't. It burns fast. Then it's just quiet. A few days after the group chat, the noise died down. No more stories. No more posts. No more frantic messages lighting up my phone every hour. Just silence. Clean almost. From what I heard, because of course people talk, Adrian and Tessa tried to turn whatever they had into something real. 4 days. That's how long it lasted. They even posted one carefully staged couple photo, trying to make it look like this had always been the plan, like everything that happened before was just a messy path to something meant to be. It didn't hold, because when you take away the secrecy, the tension, the constant push and pull, there was nothing left. No mystery, no chase, no illusion. Just two people who already knew too much about each other to pretend it was something new. They broke up the same way everything else had happened. Publicly. A vague quote from her about knowing your worth. A vague post from him about focusing on growth. Different words. Same meaning. They couldn't trust each other. And honestly, why would they? Meanwhile, Daniel, he was fine. More than fine. Not long after, he posted a quiet photo that made it clear he was moving on. Nothing flashy, just a quiet picture, coffee on a table, 2 hands in frame, captioned, "Peace feels better." I smiled when I saw that, because that was the difference. No performance. No proving anything. Just calm. As for me, I didn't rush into anything. Didn't need to. The first thing I did was sit with it. All of it. The conversations, the patterns, the moments I almost ignored my instincts because I didn't want to seem difficult. I started therapy. Not because Adrian broke me, but because I wanted to understand why I had stayed as long as I did, while something inside me kept whispering that it wasn't right. That part mattered more than anything else. About 2 weeks after everything ended, he showed up. Of course he did. It was late afternoon. The light coming through the window was soft, quiet, the kind of moment that doesn't expect interruption. Then there was a knock at the door. I knew it was him before I opened it. Adrian stood there holding a small box. My things. The ones I had left at his place. He looked different. Not dramatically. Just smaller somehow. Like the confidence he used to wear so easily had slipped. "Hey," he said. "Hey." I stepped aside just enough for him to set the box down inside, but I didn't invite him in. We stood there for a second. Then he exhaled. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." The words came out careful, measured, like he had practiced them. "For everything," he added. "I know I messed up." I nodded once. "Okay." He blinked, like he expected more. "That's it?" he asked. "What do you want me to say?" He hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. "That you forgive me. That you miss us." I held his gaze. Steady. Honest. "I don't," I said. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was final. "I really did love you," he said after a moment, softer now. I believed him. That was the complicated part. "I think you loved the attention," I replied. "The drama. The feeling of being wanted by more than one person at a time." His jaw tightened slightly. "That's not fair." "It's accurate." He looked down for a second, then back at me. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're just throwing away 18 months? I shook my head. "No," I said. "You threw it away when you decided my boundaries were a problem instead of something to respect." He didn't respond to that, because there wasn't anything to say. After a moment, he nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away. No drama. No last attempt to change my mind. Just gone. I closed the door and leaned back against it for a second. Not sad. Not relieved. Just certain. Because clarity doesn't always feel like a victory. Sometimes it just feels like peace. The kind you didn't realize you were missing until everything noisy finally stops. A few days later, I saw his profile again. Dating apps. A bio about wanting someone secure enough to handle real friendships. I almost laughed. Not out loud. Just that quiet, internal kind that comes when something finally makes perfect sense. As for me, I'm good. Better than good. Not because of what happened. Because of what I learned from it. That when someone calls your reasonable boundaries jealousy over and over again, they're not trying to understand you. They're trying to train you to accept less. And the moment you stop accepting it, everything changes.